The year was 2347, and humanity had been silent for 200 years. After the terrible wars that had united Earth under one government, humans had made a choice that shocked the entire galaxy. They chose to disappear. They pulled back all their ships from distant stars. They broke apart their massive war fleets. They buried their most dangerous soldiers in frozen vaults beneath the ice of Mars. And they told the universe a simple lie. They said humanity was dead. The other species of the galaxy believed it. They wanted to believe it. For centuries, humans had been the most feared creatures among the stars. They bred too fast. They fought too hard. They never surrendered, never stopped, never showed mercy to their enemies. When humans went to war, they did not stop until the other side was completely destroyed. The galaxy had watched in horror as humanity crushed rebellion after rebellion during their expansion years. They had seen human soldiers walk through fire and keep fighting. They had seen human generals sacrifice millions of their own people just to win a single battle. So when the humans said they were gone, everyone felt relief. The nightmare was over. The monster had put itself to sleep. But Alina Voss knew the truth. She was 73 years old, though she looked much younger thanks to life extension treatments. Her hair was gray and cut short. Her eyes were tired but sharp. She had been a famous admiral once, commanding entire fleets during the Unification Wars. She had won 12 major battles. She had also committed acts that still gave her nightmares. Now she lived alone on a tiny space station called Whisper 7, floating in the cold darkness at the edge of the solar system. This was her punishment. The government had not executed her for her war crimes. Instead, they had given her a worse fate. They made her listen to the silence of space for the rest of her life. For 40 years, Alina had sat in her small control room, monitoring signals from distant stars. She heard nothing but static. The station was old and falling apart. Sometimes she went weeks without speaking to another human being. She had accepted that she would die here, alone and forgotten. Then one night, everything changed. Alina was drinking her evening tea when the signal came through. At first, she thought it was a malfunction. The computers were old and often made mistakes. But when she checked the readings, her hands began to shake. The signal was real. It was artificial. And it was a language she recognized. During humanity's expansion years, they had cataloged hundreds of alien languages. Most species wanted nothing to do with humans, but they had still been studied from a distance. The signal coming through Elena's equipment was from a species called the Veloxi. They were insect-like beings from a cluster of stars near the Andromeda Galaxy. They had been one of the species that voted to quarantine Earth centuries ago. They had called humans the plague species and demanded they be contained. Now, we're screaming for help. Alina listened to the message over and over. It repeated on a loop, sent out in all directions, hoping someone would hear. The words were simple and desperate. They are consuming us. We are dying. Anyone who hears this, please help. We will surrender to whoever saves our children, please. They are consuming us. Alina sat in the darkness for a long time after hearing the message. Her orders were clear. She was supposed to delete any alien signals. Humanity did not exist anymore, and they needed to keep it that way. If she responded, if she told anyone about this message, she would be breaking the most important law her species had, but something in the message haunted her. The fear in those alien voices was real. Whatever was attacking them was not something they could fight. They were begging anyone in the universe to save their children, even their old enemies. Even the humans they had once tried to contain. Alina thought about her own crimes. During the wars, she had ordered the destruction of a rebel space station with 40,000 civilians on board. She had told herself it was necessary. She had told herself she had no choice. But late at night, she still heard their screams in her dreams. Maybe this was her chance to do something good. Maybe this was the universe giving her one last opportunity to balance the scales. She made her decision, deep beneath the ice of Mars. There was a vault that had not been opened in 200 years. It contained humanity's greatest secret and greatest shame. During the Unification Wars, human scientists had created something terrible. They had taken ordinary soldiers and transformed them into something more than human. They called them Archons, were the perfect warriors. Their bodies could survive in the vacuum of space. They could regrow lost arms and legs. Their brains could process battle information faster than any computer. They did not feel fear. They did not hesitate. When they went into battle, they did not stop until everything in front of them was dead. The Archons had ended the Unification Wars in just 6 months. They had crushed every rebellion, destroyed every enemy fleet, and brought all of humanity under one government. Then humanity had looked at what they created and felt terror. The Archons were too powerful, too dangerous. What if they decided they did not want to take orders anymore? What if they turned on their creators? So humanity made a dark choice. They told the Archons that their service was over. They thanked them for their sacrifice. Then they froze them in cryochambers and buried them under the Martian ice. 12,000 of the deadliest warriors ever created, sleeping in the cold darkness. Alina knew about the vaults. Everyone who had served in the old military knew. It was the secret that kept humanity safe from external threats. If anyone ever attacked Earth, the Archons could be awakened. They were the insurance policy. The last resort, she opened a communication channel that had not been used in decades. It connected directly to the Terran Preservation Council, the secret group that governed humanity's hidden existence. An old man's face appeared on her screen. He had dark skin and white hair and eyes that had seen too much. His name was Kofi Asante, and he was 112 years old. He was the director of the council. He was also one of the few people alive who had seen the Archons in action during the wars. "Admiral Voss," he said, his voice heavy with surprise. "You are supposed to be monitoring silence, not breaking it." Lena sent him the alien signal. She watched his face as he listened to the desperate voices begging for help. "The Veluxi tried to quarantine us," Asante said, when the message ended. "They called us monsters. Why should we care if they die? Because whatever is killing them will not stop with them," Alina replied. "Listen to that fear, Director. They are not losing a war. They are being eaten. And if something out there can eat the Veluxi, it can eat us too." Asante was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "You want to wake them, don't you? You want to wake the Archons?" Alina nodded. "I think it is time the universe remembered what humanity really is." The old director closed his eyes. He remembered the Archons. He remembered watching them tear through enemy ships like they were made of paper. He remembered signing the order to put them to sleep because he was terrified of what they might become. Now someone was asking him to open that door again. "God help us all," he said quietly. Then he ended the transmission and began making calls. The vault beneath Mars had been sealed for 2 centuries, but not for much longer. Director Kofi Asante had not slept in 3 days. He sat in the council chamber deep beneath the mountains of old Switzerland, surrounded by holographic screens, showing data he wished he had never seen. The other council members sat around him, their faces pale with fear. The Veluxi distress signal was not the only one. In the past 72 hours, they had intercepted 14 more emergency broadcasts from different species across the galaxy. All of them told the same story. Something was coming. Something was eating entire civilizations. And it was getting closer to the Milky Way. The Council's intelligence division had pieced together the truth. The attackers were called the Devourers. They were not like any species humanity had ever encountered. They were not made of flesh and blood. They were something older and stranger. A swarm intelligence that had evolved millions of years ago in a distant galaxy. They did not want territory or resources or power. They wanted only one thing. They wanted to feed. The Devourers consumed organic matter. All organic matter. When they found a planet with life, they landed on it and began eating. They ate the plants. They ate the animals. They ate the people. They ate until nothing was left but bare rock and empty oceans. Then they moved on to the next world. They had already destroyed 11 civilizations in the local cluster. Billions of lives erased. Entire histories and cultures gone forever. The Veluxi were simply next on the menu. "The swarm will reach our galaxy within 2 years," one of the council members said. Her name was Minister Chen, and she was responsible for defense planning. If they follow their usual pattern, they will consume everything in their path until they reach us. How large is the swarm? Another member asked. Minister Chen pulled up a holographic image. It showed space filled with massive organic shapes. They looked like living mountains covered in teeth and tentacles. Each one was the size of a small moon. Current estimates suggest over 100 bioships, Chen said. Each one capable of consuming a medium-sized planet in approximately 6 months. The room fell silent. 100 planet-eating monsters heading toward their home. The old human military could never fight such a force. They had dismantled most of their weapons centuries ago, but they had not dismantled everything. We need to discuss the Archon option, Director Asante said quietly. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Archons were not supposed to be discussed. They were supposed to be forgotten. The idea of waking them filled everyone with dread. The Archons are too dangerous, an elderly member named Counselor Patel said. We put them to sleep for a reason. They are weapons without conscience. If we wake them, how do we know they will not turn on us? We do not know, Asante admitted. But if we do not wake them, we will all be dead anyway. The Devourers do not negotiate. They do not make treaties. They simply consume. The debate went on for hours. Some members argued that humanity should stay hidden and hope the Devourers pass them by. Others said they should try to build new weapons instead of relying on the Archons. But everyone knew the truth. There was not enough time to build a new military, and hiding would only delay the inevitable. In the end, the vote was close. 7 in favor, 5 against. The Archons would be awakened, but not all of them. The council decided to wake only one Archon first. A test. If he was stable, if he could be controlled, then they would consider waking more. The Archon they chose was named Silas Wren. Director Asante traveled to the vaults personally. He took a small transport ship to Mars, then descended through miles of ice until he reached the massive underground facility. It was cold and dark and filled with the hum of ancient machines. The cryo-chambers stretched as far as the eye could see. 12,000 of them, arranged in perfect rows. Each one contained a sleeping warrior. Men and women who had been engineered for war. They looked peaceful in their frozen sleep, but Asante remembered what they looked like when they were awake. He remembered the blood and the fire and the screaming. Silas Wren's chamber was in the center of the facility. He had been the most famous of all the Archons. During the Unification Wars, he had commanded the assault on the rebel moon of Titan. When the defenders refused to surrender, Silas had ordered his ships to bombard the surface until nothing was left alive. 40 million people had died in a single day. The rebellion ended 1 week later. Silas was a monster. But he was humanity's monster. And right now, they needed a monster. The technicians began the awakening process. It took 6 hours for the cryo-chamber to warm up safely. Asante watched through a glass window as the ice slowly melted and the man inside began to move. Silas Wren opened his eyes. He was tall, nearly 7 feet, with a body built for combat. His skin was pale from centuries in the cold. His eyes were gray and completely empty of emotion. When he looked at Asante through the glass, the old director felt a chill run down his spine. They brought Silas to a briefing room and explained everything. The Devourers, the dying civilizations, the threat to Earth. Silas listened without expression, his eyes scanning the data on the screens around him. When they finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. His voice was deep and cold, like stones grinding together. How many do you need me to kill? Asante felt his stomach turn. 200 years of sleep, and this was the first thing Silas asked. Not where he was. Not what year it was. Not about friends or family or the world he had left behind. Just a simple question about killing. You do not know yet, Asante replied. We need you to go on a reconnaissance mission. Travel to Veluxy space and assess the threat. See how powerful the Devourers really are? Then report back. Silas nodded slowly. And if the threat is as bad as you fear, then we will wake your brothers and sisters. all 12,000 of them. For the first time, something flickered in Silas's empty eyes. It might have been satisfaction. It might have been hunger. Asante could not tell. "Give me a ship," Silas said. "I will leave within the hour." They gave him a stealth corvette, a small, fast ship designed to avoid detection. They also gave him to support staff, a young pilot named Marcus and an intelligence officer named Dr. Sarah Webb. Both were volunteers. Both were terrified of the Archon they would be traveling with. Before Silas left, Asante spoke to him one final time. "The galaxy thinks we are dead," the director said. "For 200 years, we have let them believe that lie. If you reveal yourself out there, everything changes. They will know humanity still exists. They will know about the Archons." Silas turned to face him. His gray eyes showed nothing. "Good," he said. "Let them remember what they forgot. Let them remember why they were afraid." Then he walked onto his ship and disappeared into the darkness of space. Asante stood alone in the hangar for a long time after the ship was gone. He had just unleashed something terrible on the galaxy. He had just woken a weapon that might be more dangerous than the threat it was meant to fight. But what choice did he have? The Devourers were coming. They would consume everything in their path. And the only thing in the universe that might be able to stop them was a man who had burned 40 million people without hesitation. Sometimes, to fight monsters, you needed a bigger monster. Asante said a quiet prayer to whatever gods might be listening. Then he returned to the council chamber to wait for Silas Wren's report, in the cold darkness between stars. The stealth corvette flew toward alien space. Inside, Silas Wren sat perfectly still, his mind already calculating battle strategies for enemies he had not yet seen. He had slept for 200 years. Now he was awake, and the galaxy would soon remember why humanity had been the most feared species among the stars. The war giants were rising. The journey to Veluxi space took 3 weeks. Silas Wren spent most of that time in silence, reviewing old military data and studying everything humanity knew about the Devourers. His 2 crew members, Marcus and Dr. Webb, kept their distance. They had heard the stories about what Archons had done during the wars. They did not want to make him angry, but Silas did not seem angry. He did not seem anything. He was like a machine waiting to be turned on, calm, patient, and completely empty of emotion. When they finally reached the edge of Veluxi territory, Silas ordered Marcus to bring up the sensors. What they saw made Dr. Webb cover her mouth in horror. The Veluxi homeworld was called Kitharis. It was supposed to be a beautiful planet covered in vast forests and crystal-clear oceans. Billions of Veluxi had lived there for thousands of years, building great cities and developing advanced technology now. It was dying. The Devourer. Bioships had attached themselves to the planet like parasites. There were 8 of them. Massive organic mountains latched onto the surface. Long tentacles stretched down from each ship, reaching into the ground, into the oceans, into the cities. They were draining everything, sucking the life out of the planet like vampires feeding on blood. From orbit, they could see the dead zones spreading. Brown patches where forest had once stood, empty gray areas where cities had been. The Devourers had already consumed perhaps half the planet. The rest would follow within months. "Those things are feeding on billions of people," Dr. Webb whispered. "Right now." While we watch, Silas said nothing. He was studying the Devourer ships, analyzing their weak points, calculating attack vectors. To him, this was not a tragedy. It was a tactical problem. "Take us to the orbital stations," he ordered. "The survivors will be there." Marcus flew the Corvette toward a cluster of space stations above the planet. Thousands of ships surrounded them, a desperate flotilla of refugees who had escaped the surface before the Devourers came. Among them were warships from other species. The Veluxi were not fighting alone. Silas learned that 14 different species had formed a coalition to resist the Devourers. They called themselves the Galactic Defense Alliance. They had been fighting for 3 years. In that time, they had lost 60% of their combined forces. Every battle was a defeat. Every victory was temporary. The Devourers just kept coming. The Coalition's War Council was meeting on the largest station. Silas decided it was time to introduce himself. "Are you sure that is wise?" Dr. Webb asked. "If they find out humanity still exists, if they find out about the Arctians, ... They need to find out," Silas replied. "They cannot beat the Devourers. We can, but only if they let us help." He left his crew on the Corvette and flew a shuttle to the station alone. He wore his old military uniform, the black armor of an Archon commander. He wanted them to know exactly what he was. The War Council chamber was filled with beings from different worlds. There were the Veluxi, tall, insect-like creatures with 4 arms and compound eyes. There were the Rithani beings, made of pure energy, who floated in special containment fields. There were massive rock-like creatures called the Thren, and small, quick beings covered in blue fur called the Khazari. A dozen other species filled the room, all of them united by desperation. When Silas walked in, the room went quiet. Every eye and sensor turned to look at him. For a moment no one spoke. Then one of the Rithani floated forward. It was ancient. Its energy patterns faded with age. When it spoke, its voice echoed with recognition and fear. "Impossible," the Rithani said. "That uniform. That genetic signature. You are an Archon, a human war giant." Panic spread through the room. Council members backed away from Silas. Some reached for weapons. The word spread like wildfire, passed from translator to translator. "Human, the humans are not dead. They sent an Archon." The Veluxi general in charge of the coalition was named Thraxus. He was old for his species, his exoskeleton scarred from many battles. He had spent his entire career studying humanity's wars. He had written papers about their tactics, their brutality, their impossible resilience. He had thanked his gods many times that humans had chosen to disappear. Now one stood before him. "Why are you here?" Thraxus demanded. "Humanity withdrew from the galaxy. You were supposed to be gone." Silas met the general's compound eyes without flinching. "We heard your distress call. We came to investigate." "To investigate," another council member shouted. A Kasari ambassador stepped forward, her blue fur bristling with anger. "Your people killed millions during your expansion. You burned worlds that refused to submit, and now you come to investigate?" Silas remained calm. He had expected this reaction. The galaxy had good reasons to fear humanity. His species had earned that fear through blood and fire. "Yes," he said simply. "We killed millions. We were young and hungry and cruel, but we learned from our mistakes. We put ourselves to sleep to protect the galaxy from what we were." He gestured to the screens showing the dying planet below. "The Devourers have no such restraint. They do not conquer. They do not negotiate. They consume. Every species they encounter, every civilization they find, becomes food. They have already eaten 11 civilizations. You will be the 12th. And when they finish with you, they will come for everyone else." The room was silent. They all knew he spoke the truth. They had watched the Devourers destroy world after world. Their alliance was crumbling. Their hope was fading. General Thraxus stepped closer to the human. "You said you came to investigate. What did you find?" Silas pulled up tactical data on the main screen. It showed the Devourer swarm, their attack patterns, their weaknesses. "I found an enemy that can be beaten," he said. "The Devourers are powerful, but they are not invincible. Their bioships have critical weak points. Their swarm intelligence can be disrupted, but you do not have the weapons or the warriors to exploit those weaknesses. And humanity does." Thraxus asked. Silas allowed himself a small smile. It was not a warm expression. It was the smile of a predator who had found prey. "Humanity has 12,000. Archons sleeping beneath the ice of Mars. We have the blueprints for warships that make your largest vessels look like toys. We have weapons that were designed to end wars in days, not years." He looked around the room at the terrified aliens who had once voted to contain his species. "You called us the plague species. You said we were too dangerous to exist? Maybe you were right. But right now, you need a plague. You need something the Devourers have never faced before. Something that will not run. Something that will not surrender. Something that will hunt them down and destroy them completely. The Rithani elder spoke again. If we accept your help, what guarantee do we have that you will not turn on us when the Devourers are gone? It was a fair question. Humanity's history gave them every reason to be afraid. None, Silas admitted. You have no guarantee. But you have a choice. You can refuse our help and die, or you can accept it and take your chances with us. General Thraxus looked at his fellow council members. He saw the fear in their eyes. Fear of the Devourers. Fear of the humans. Fear of a future where they had no good options. But fear of the Devourers was greater. The Devourers offered certain death. The humans offered uncertain survival. Except Thraxus said finally, "What do you need?" Silas turned back to the screen showing the dying planet. His gray eyes reflected the images of Devourer ships feeding on billions of lives. "Time," he said. "Hold them here as long as you can. I will return to Earth and wake my brothers and sisters. All of them." He looked back at the terrified council. "And then we will show the Devourers what happens when they wake the war giants of Earth." Silas left the station and returned to his Corvette. Behind him, the coalition prepared for the fight of their lives. They were terrified of what was coming. But for the first time in 3 years, they also had something they had almost forgotten. They had hope. The humans were coming, and whatever else they were not prey. Silas Wren's report reached Earth like a thunderbolt. The council read his assessment in horrified silence. The Devourers were worse than their worst nightmares. More powerful than anything humanity had ever faced, and they were heading toward the Milky Way. Director Asante called an emergency session. This time there was no debate. No arguments about whether the Archon should be awakened. The only question was how fast they could do it. The answer was not fast enough. The cryovaults beneath Mars were designed for long-term storage, not rapid deployment. Waking an Archon safely took 6 hours. Waking 12,000 of them would take weeks, and the coalition was dying every day. "We do not have weeks," Minister Chen said. "The Devourers will consume the Veluxy homeworld within a month. After that, they will move on to the next system. Then the next. We need those Archons fighting now." The council made a desperate decision. They would cut the awakening time in half by increasing the warming speed. It was dangerous. Some Archons might suffer brain damage or die during the process. But they had no choice. The orders went out. Every cryotechnician on Mars was called to duty. Emergency teams flew in from Earth and the outer colonies. The vaults that had been silent for 2 centuries suddenly hummed with activity, and one by one, the Archons woke up. It was not a gentle process. Many of them came out of cryo-sleep confused and violent. They had been frozen in the middle of a war. Their last memories were of blood and battle. When they opened their eyes and saw unfamiliar faces, their first instinct was to fight. The technicians learned quickly to stand back when an Archon woke. They would let the warrior rage for a few minutes, destroying furniture and punching walls until the confusion passed. Then they would carefully explain what had happened. 200 years of sleep. A new enemy. A galaxy that needed saving. Most of the Archons accepted the news calmly. They were soldiers. They had been made for war. The idea of a new enemy to fight did not bother them. It gave them purpose, but some struggled with the adjustment. They had friends and family who were long dead. The world they remembered was gone. Everything they knew had turned to dust while they slept. One Archon, a woman named Yuki Tanaka, had been the youngest ever created. She was only 19 when they froze her. Now she was technically 219 years old, but she still had the face of a teenager. Yukea had been a prodigy, the fastest thinker among all the Archons, the best tactical mind of her generation. She had commanded entire fleets at an age when most people were still in school. Now she stood in the awakening chamber, looking at a holographic display of the changed galaxy. "They thought they could just put us away," she said quietly, "like tools in a drawer. Wake us up when they needed us, then put us back to sleep." Director Asante had come to Mars personally to oversee the awakening. He heard Yuki's words and felt shame wash over him. Yes, he admitted. That is exactly what we did. We were afraid of what you were. We did not know how to live with you in peace. Yuki turned to face him. Her eyes were sharp and bright, filled with an intelligence that was almost frightening. And now we are more afraid of what will happen without you, Asante said honestly. The Devourers will consume everything. Earth, Mars, every human colony, every species in the galaxy. You are the only thing that might be able to stop them. Yuki was silent for a moment. Then she nodded. Then give me a fleet, she said. I will show these Devourers what a real predator looks like. The old shipyards of Earth had been abandoned for 2 centuries. Massive orbital factories that had once produced warships by the hundreds now floated empty and dark. The Council authorized their reactivation. It was like waking a sleeping giant. Workers flooded into the shipyards. Old blueprints were pulled from archives. Materials flowed in from mining operations across the solar system. The factories began to hum. They started with the Colossus-class dreadnoughts. These were humanity's ultimate warships. Each one was 3 miles long, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. They had been designed during the darkest days of the Unification Wars, when humanity needed ships that could win any battle against any enemy. Building a Colossus from scratch would take years. But the shipyards had something better. Dozens of half-finished Colossus hulls had been stored in deep space, waiting for a war that never came. Now teams of engineers worked around the clock to complete them. Admiral Yuki Tanaka took command of the fleet construction. Despite her young appearance, no one questioned her authority. They had all seen her service record. They knew what she was capable of. While the ships were being built, something unexpected happened. Volunteers began to arrive. For 200 years, humans had lived in peace. They had never known war. They had grown up in a society that valued cooperation and kindness. The Unification Wars were ancient history to them, something they learned about in school but never truly understood. Now they learned that their existence was threatened. A swarm of planet-eating monsters was heading toward their home, and their only defense was a group of enhanced soldiers who had been created before their grandparents were born. Many people were content to let the Archons handle it, but others felt something different. They felt a call to action, a need to stand and fight for their home. Even if they had never held a weapon in their lives, the first volunteer was a young man from Earth named Thomas Cole. He was a school teacher, 28 years old, with a wife and young daughter. He showed up at a military recruitment center that had been closed for decades. I want to enlist, he said. The confused officials did not know what to do with him. There was no military to enlist in. But Thomas refused to leave. He stood outside the recruitment center for 3 days until his story reached the news networks. Soon others joined him. Thousands at first, then tens of thousands, then millions. People from every colony, every station, every corner of human space, old and young, rich and poor, scientists and farmers, all of them asking the same question: how can we help? Director Asante watched the crowds gathering and felt tears forming in his eyes. For 200 years, humanity had hidden from the galaxy because they were ashamed of their violent past. They had convinced themselves that they were monsters who needed to be contained. But now, faced with a real threat, ordinary humans were volunteering to fight. Not because they enjoyed violence, not because they wanted to conquer, but because they wanted to protect their families and their home. Maybe humanity was not the monsters they thought they were. Maybe they were something better. The volunteers could not become Archons. That required genetic engineering that took years. But they could serve on ships. They could maintain weapons. They could fly support craft. They could do 1,000 tasks that would free the Archons to focus on fighting. 20 million volunteers enlisted in the first month. The Terran Preservation Council had to create an entirely new military structure to organize them all. 60 days after the awakening began, the human expeditionary fleet was ready. 300 warships, including 12 fully operational Colossus-class dreadnoughts. 12,000 Archons, each one a one-person army. 20 million human volunteers, terrified but determined. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Unconquered Sun. It was the largest ship ever built by human hands. Around her, the entire fleet waited in formation. Silas Wren appeared on her communication screen. He had been with the coalition forces, helping them hold the line against the Devourers. His face was tired but fierce. "They are losing," Silas reported. "The Devourers have finished with the Veluxy homeworld and are moving on to the next system. The coalition fleet is down to less than 100 ships. If we do not arrive soon, there will be nothing left to save." Yuki turned to her crew. They were volunteers, ordinary humans who had never seen combat. They looked at her with wide, frightened eyes. "Today we go to war," she said. "Many of us will not return, but those who survive will be able to tell their children and grandchildren that they were there. They were there when humanity rose from the ashes and showed the galaxy what we truly are." She turned back to the screen showing the stars. "All ships prepare for fold space jump. Destination Veluxy space." The engines of 300 warships roared to life. Reality bent around them as they prepared to cross the vast distances between stars. The war giants were coming, and the Devourers were about to learn why the galaxy had feared humanity for so long. The coalition fleet was dying. General Thraxus stood on the bridge of his damaged command ship, watching the tactical display with growing despair. Another cruiser had just been destroyed. Another 1,000 lives gone. The Devourers showed no signs of slowing down. 60 bioships now surrounded what remained of the Veluxicore worlds. Each one was a living nightmare. Miles of organic matter designed for one purpose: consumption. They had finished eating the homeworld. Now they were moving on to the colonies, the moons, the space stations. Everything that lived would soon be food. Thraxus had 93 ships left. When the battle started 3 months ago, he had over 300. The coalition was not losing this war. They were being exterminated. One of his officers called out, "We are detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the system." Thraxus turned to look at the sensor display. What he saw made his heart stop beating for a moment. Ships, hundreds of them, appearing from fold space in perfect formation. And at the center of the formation, 12 massive vessels, unlike anything he had ever seen. They were 3 miles long each, bristling with weapons, radiating power like small suns. The human fleet had arrived. Admiral Yuki Tanaka's voice came through on all coalition frequencies. It was calm and cold, the voice of someone who had seen 1,000 battles and never lost. "Coalition forces, this is the human expeditionary fleet. We are here to assist. All ships fall back to our formation. We will take the lead." Thraxus did not hesitate. He ordered his battered ships to retreat behind the human lines. As they moved, he got his first clear look at the human vessels. They were beautiful in a terrifying way. Sleek and deadly, designed for maximum destruction with minimum waste. On the bridge of the Unconquered Sun, Yuki studied the Devourer positions. Her enhanced mind processed thousands of data points in seconds. She saw patterns that normal beings would never notice, weaknesses that could be exploited, opportunities that could be seized. "All ships, attack pattern Omega-7, she ordered. "Colossus Group, target the largest bioships. All other vessels form screening positions. Do not let anything through to the coalition fleet." The human fleet moved like a single organism. No hesitation. No confusion. Every ship knew exactly where to go and what to do. This was the result of centuries of military development. Combined with the superhuman coordination of Archon commanders, the Devourers responded to the new threat. By turning their attention away from the coalition, 60 bioships changed course, heading directly toward the human formation. They had never encountered these new enemies before. They did not know what they were facing. They were about to learn. The first volley from the Colossus dreadnoughts tore through space like the wrath of angry gods. Plasma beams hundreds of meters wide sliced through Devourer bioships. Missiles carrying antimatter warheads detonated inside organic hulls. In the first 60 seconds of combat, 3 bioships were completely destroyed. The Devourers had never lost 3 ships in a single battle before. They had never lost 3 ships in an entire campaign. The swarm intelligence that controlled them felt something it had not experienced in millions of years: confusion. Commander Silas Wren led the assault teams. Hundreds of small craft launched from the human ships, carrying Archon warriors directly into the battle. While the big guns handled the bioships in space, Silas and his soldiers would take the fight to the enemy up close. His assault pod crashed through the organic hull of a Devourer ship. He cut his way out with a plasma blade, emerging into a nightmare landscape of pulsing walls and screaming organic machines. The interior of a bioship was alive. Everything moved. Everything hungered. Silas did not hesitate. He advanced through the corridors, killing everything in his path. His enhanced body moved faster than any normal creature could follow. His weapons never stopped firing. His blade never stopped cutting. Other Archons spread through the bioship behind him. They were surgical and efficient. They had studied the Devourer biology and knew exactly where to strike. The nerve clusters, the feeding tubes, the organic reactors that powered the ship. One by one, they destroyed the critical systems. The bioship began to die from the inside. Outside, the space battle raged on. The Devourers threw everything they had at the human fleet. Swarms of smaller organisms attacked like locusts. Acid projectiles the size of buildings hurtled through the void. Organic tentacles, miles long, tried to grab human ships and pull them into hungry mouths. The human fleet responded with controlled fury. Point defense systems vaporized the smaller attackers. Shields deflected the acid. When tentacles grabbed the smaller vessels, other ships would fly in to cut them free. Admiral Tanaka's flagship, the Unconquered Sun, pushed to the front of the battle. She was not content to command from the rear. She wanted to be where the fighting was thickest. 11 bioships attacked her vessel directly. They saw the command ship and recognized it as the leader. Kill the leader, they thought, and the formation will break. They were wrong. The Unconquered Sun was the most heavily armed ship in the human fleet. Tanaka had designed its weapon systems herself. When the bioships attacked, she simply smiled. "Show them what we can do," she told her crew. The flagship unleashed devastation. Weapons that had been banned after the Unification Wars. Weapons that were designed to end civilizations. Beams of energy so hot they could melt moons. Missiles that created artificial black holes. A cannon that fired concentrated dark matter. 11 bioships attacked. 0 survived. On the surface of the dead Veluxi homeworld, Silas Wren led a ground assault. The Devourers had built processing camps there. Facilities where captured Veluxi were being converted into organic material for the swarm. Thousands of prisoners were still alive, waiting to be consumed. Silas was not going to let that happen. His assault force cut through the Devourer defenses like a hot knife through butter. The organic guards and workers were no match for Archon warriors. Silas fought for 6 hours straight without rest. Every time he was wounded, his enhanced body healed within minutes. Every time he grew tired, his engineered metabolism gave him new energy. By the end, the processing camps were destroyed. Over 8,000 Veluxi prisoners had been freed. They looked at their human rescuers with compound eyes full of wonder and fear. "You saved us," one of them said. "Why?" Silas looked at the grateful alien. He thought about the question. Why had he come? Why had any of them come? They could have stayed hidden on Earth, safe behind their false death. The galaxy had hated and feared humanity for centuries. They owed these aliens nothing, but that was exactly why they had to come. Because the galaxy expected humans to be selfish, to be cruel, to care only about themselves. By coming here, by fighting and dying to save species that had once called them monsters, humanity could prove that they had changed. That they were something more than the violent conquerors they used to be, because it was the right thing to do. Silas finally answered. The battle of the Veluxi core worlds lasted 9 hours. When it was over, The results were beyond anything the Coalition had dared to hope. 40-3 Devourer bioships destroyed. The remaining 17 scattered into deep space, their swarm intelligence broken and confused. For the first time in their million-year history, the Devourers had been defeated. Not just stopped, defeated. The human fleet had lost 18 ships. 3,000 human volunteers had died. 200 Archons had fallen. But they had won. Against impossible odds, they had won. General Thraxus brought his damaged command ship alongside the unconquered sun. He requested permission to come aboard. Admiral Tanaka granted it. The old Veluxi general walked onto the bridge of the human flagship. He looked around at the crew, young human volunteers who had never known war until today. He looked at Admiral Tanaka, a teenager in body but ancient in mind. He remembered all the times his people had called humans monsters. All the times they had voted to contain them. Then, he did something no Veluxi had ever done before. He knelt before a human. On behalf of the Galactic Defense Alliance, Thraxus said, "I offer our deepest gratitude. You have saved us. All of us. We called you the plague species. We were wrong. You are the cure." Yuki Tanaka looked at the kneeling general. She thought about the frozen vaults where her brothers and sisters had slept for 2 centuries. She thought about the shame humanity had carried for so long. She thought about the millions of volunteers who had come to fight, not because they loved war, but because they loved their homes and families. "Stand up, General," she said. "We are not gods or saviors. We are just people who got tired of running from what we are." She offered him her hand. After a moment's hesitation, he took it. On the bridge of the unconquered sun, surrounded by the wreckage of victory, a new alliance was born. Not based on fear or submission. Based on respect and shared sacrifice, the Devourers would return someday. They always did. But when that day came, they would find the galaxy united. They would find humans and Veluxi and Rithani and a dozen other species standing together. And leading them would be the Archons, the war giants of Earth. Finally, at peace with what they were, Silas Wren stood at a viewport, looking out at the stars. He thought about Alina Voss, the disgraced admiral who had heard the first distress signal. He thought about Director Asante, the old man who had dared to wake the sleeping monsters. He thought about all the volunteers who had given their lives for aliens they had never met. Humanity spent 2 centuries hiding from their nature, running from the violence in their past, pretending to be dead because they were afraid of what they might become. Now they knew the truth. Violence was not who they were. It was just a tool. And like any tool, it could be used for destruction or protection. For conquest or salvation, the galaxy had feared humanity for good reason. But now they had a new reason to remember the humans, not as monsters, not as conquerors, but as the species that had risen from self-imposed exile to save civilizations they did not even like. The war giants of Earth had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same.